Hello friends, good morning and welcome to the webinar of GST. As a part of the Student Month celebration of the Institute of Company Secretaries of India, we are today organizing a webcast for the students focusing on various aspects of GST. Today we have with us Ms. Meenal Agarwal, who is a qualified CA and a CS and has an experience of 6 years post qualification. She has been an expert in indirect taxes and has been assisting various industries on GST implementations in last 1 year. She has also addressed various seminars for trade associations with Delhi VAT officials, and she is a regular author in leading newspapers and newsletters of various institutes. She is a regular speaker at various study circles and a regular faculty with all the institutes. She has been involved in the departmental trainings for the industry vendors and employees for GST preparedness. We hand over the session to Ms. Meenal to take you through the aspects of GST. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. So a very good morning to all of you all. We hope the next 1.5 hours that we have for this GST session proves to be a fruitful session for all of us together, and we are able to take some beautiful insights, knowledge-worthy session. It should be for all of us collectively to learn and see that how GST is actually a game-changer reform that has come up in the present indirect taxation system of the country altogether. And we hope that the students who are right now live with us get the maximum benefit out of it. Considering the fact that GST is now live from 1st of July 2017 in the entire country, we consider ourselves the luckiest one to be actually streaming this live in our span of professional attires, because this has been a biggest tax reform in the entire in the past 60 years of our country so far. And we see that how, with a GST coming in frame, the entire ways of doing business in India is going to change. And so we call GST not just a tax reform, but an entire business reform in total. When the first time this GST was being introduced into the Lok Sabha, the Prime Minister introduced it like a great step by Team India, a great step towards transparency and a great step towards transformation. And once we introduce it into the country from 1st of July, we also call it as the good and the simple tax the country is trying to achieve for its working and for the businesses to flourish and to explore their opportunities altogether. So now the point is that it is actually a good and a simple tax or not. So considering that in mind, let's go through, step by step some broad parameters to understand at least the basics of the GST for the student fraternity. Before I actually go into the technicalities of the subject, one thing which I would really like to press upon is that you students are really very are important. It is for you to understand this concept of GST, not just because soon it might be a part of your syllabus, but also because that once you are actually going to be professionals altogether in the next 1 year, 2 year or 3 year of a time, then GST is actually going to be a very flourishing area of practice, of actually getting into an expertise into, so that we can guide our clients, our industries accordingly. For that, let's just start. So before understanding the entire concept of this game changer tax reform, let's understand how the things have actually fallen in place with respect to the structural part of this entire law. So GST actually, got its birth by this GST Council, and I'll not go into too much of a background, but I'll just say that it's been 15 long years that GST is actually taken for the country to be implemented too. But 12th of September was a very important day, because that day the GST Council, which is actually the mother and the father in simple words of the entire GST law, came into existence to frame these particular law and give them the technicalities and give them the legal functionalities. Then we had the 3rd November, which actually became another milestone of a date when the rates of the GST Council were first being finalized in terms of a fitmentation that broadly will have a 4-tier, 5-tier rate structure. Then in line we had 29th March and 31st March where this GST draft law was being passed by the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, and finally we got the presidential consent towards it, and on 31st March we had the final rules, and thereafter we had on 7th of April the final GST law being passed by all the three bodies, and the presidential consent was being given to it on 13th of April. Finally, we have from 1st of July the GST being implemented into the country, with all the GST acts being splitted broadly into 4 acts, which is the Central GST, we call it as the CGST Act, the Union Territory GST Act, and the Integrated GST Act, along with a GST Compensation Act. So these are broadly the 4 legal aspects of the acts which have been finalized by the GST Council and the Parliament of the country, which is being implemented and notified and enforced from 1st of July. So now if we further move ahead and understand 3 broad parameters to start with to understand the GST concept. And we'll go simultaneously to understand that what has been the pre-GST era like and what has been the post-GST changes into this era, which, how things are going to change in the present system towards it. So the first and the foremost thing in this regard is the shift from the origin-based taxation system to a destination-based taxation system. Whatever present indirect taxes which we were having in the country right now, if we broadly understand that in the present structure we have we are either doing the manufacturing and we are paying excise duty on the same, or we are trading the goods and we are paying either VAT or CST on the same, or we are involved into some movement of the goods and we are using some C forms, F forms, H forms respectively for different purposes for the same, or we are providing services and we are charging service tax on the same. So these are broadly the 4 parameters of the present indirect taxes that is happening for us, and all these present indirect taxes are based on the concept of origin-based taxation system, which we can very understand through a very simple example. Say for example, I have a factory and that factory is located in the state of Gurgaon, and my goods are actually traveling to one of my customers located in the state of Rajasthan. So now in the present system what happens is that I'm supposed to pay an excise duty, and this excise duty is actually going to the government where my factory is located. So basically excise duty is going to the government where the factory is located, which in our example is Gurgaon. But in the post GST scenario what will happen is this concept of origin-based taxation, which actually shift to a destination-based taxation system, which per se means that in our example, in the post-GST scenario, the taxes which we are going to pay for this particular example, where the factory is located in the state of Haryana, but it is actually getting consumed in the state of Rajasthan, the GST taxes will be given to the state of Rajasthan, not to the state of Haryana where it is originating from. So this is a shift from a origin-based system to a destination-based consumption tax, where the taxes will now go to the state where the actual consumption of the goods or the services is taking place. Now this change in altogether is going to be a big change for the entire business functioning, to understand that how things are going to change at an economic level also. The next broader change with respect to the GST is that we are actually shifting towards a dual structure of GST. GST is not something which is new to the world. GST has its breaking in the year of 1954, and first started long ago in the state of France and Canada, and from there we are actually coming to 2017, where India is actually getting started with GST. So now if we talk about that scenario, we say in the worldwide scenarios, the GST is actually which is being implemented is a single form of GST. But because India is a federal economy where the state and the central governments have equal powers to charge, levy and collect taxes, in India we are actually coming up with a dual structure of GST. What we simply mean by a dual structure of GST is that in GST regime in our country, every transaction will be charged with 2 types of GST. And for that, they have further divided that each transaction has to be identified as an intrastate transaction and as an interstate transaction. So if it is an intrastate transaction, GST in its dual structure has to be levied in the nomenclature of CGST, that is Central GST, plus State GST, that is SGST. So CGST plus SGST, for example, if we say that on a particular goods, the rate of GST is 18%, and if it is an intrastate transaction, then GST shall be levied in the nomenclature of 9% CGST and 9% SGST. Similarly, if it is an interstate transaction where 2 states are involved, then GST shall be levied in the nomenclature of IGST, that is integrated GST, say for example 18%. So this is called as the dual structure of GST, which is being introduced into the country instead of a single GST rate, which you might have seen in developed countries like Singapore, which we say is the best example of a good GST implementation in the world, where we just have a single percentage of 7% GST. But in our country, because of a federal economy, we have a dual concept of GST. The next important part which we need to understand is, as I just mentioned before, that in the present regime we are either manufacturing goods, or we are trading of goods, or we are actually providing services. So these are the 3 broad categories which we define a particular business sector into: a manufacturer, trader, or a service provider. But in the post GST regime, there is nothing actually called as manufacturing, trading and services providing. What we now call it is just one term, which is actually supply. So it is actually a supplier of goods or supplier of services in the post GST, which is going to be actually relevant. So this is also one of the major nomenclature changes that we need to understand, that we do not call in the post GST scenario a transaction to be as a sale or a transaction to be as a manufacturing transaction. We just call it as a supply of goods or a supply of services in the post GST regime. Now, when we mentioned that India is having a dual structure of GST, we understood that for an intrastate transaction, we have a CGST and SGST which is being levied, and simultaneously for an interstate transaction, an IGST is levied. Similarly, for all import related transactions, we basically have in the present structure BCD, that is the basic custom duty that we are paying, or we are actually paying on top of it a CVD, which is a countervailing duty, and a cess element is there, and then finally we have a special additional duty. So these are broadly the 4 taxes which we are paying at the time of import of any goods in the pre-GST scenario. In the post-GST scenario, what happens is that we are paying first of all the basic custom duty, which remains the way it is right now, and then we are going towards the cess element, and instead of the CVD and the SAD, we are actually paying IGST. So we'll go into the details in the next few minutes, but in the broader sense, what we can understand right now is that for import purposes also, the tax that is going to be levied in the GST regime is going to be in the nomenclature of IGST only. So for all interstate and import related transactions for goods and services, we are going to have GST in the nomenclature of IGST. Now again, further if we go and understand the deeper technicalities of the law, I always feel that before we really want to understand a law, we need to understand the law through the mischief rule of interpretation, which I'm sure most of you understand is one of the very prominent rules of interpretation which we've been using to understand any new law. And this mischief rule basically means and says that any law which is being framed, or anything new, any new law that comes up, always comes up with an intention to pacify, with an intention to rectify and remedify the present problems or the present intricacies which are going on, because of which the actual beneficiaries of this particular law are not getting the required benefits or are having some problems to be faced. So when we talk about the GST law coming in frame, GST law is also one of the laws which is drafted and which is being introduced with a view that it should actually curb the problems of the present indirect taxes and should give benefit to the businesses who are actually running and who are paying these taxes and who are doing the compliances altogether for it. So in order to give them those benefits, GST is being introduced into the country, and for that purpose we need to understand what are the benefits the government is actually targeting upon with the introduction of this new law into the country. So we'll understand this through some very simple examples also in a broader way, because this forms the basis of the entire GST law for us to understand. So the first and the foremost benefit which we are trying to target upon, or for that matter the government is trying to achieve through GST, is the end of the discrimination between the classification of goods and services. I'll make you understand this with a very simple examples. We all have been going to restaurants for lunches and dinners, and if you have ever noticed onto the restaurant bill that you have received, we are always being charged with two elements of taxes, that is the VAT and the services tax both. So now this has always been a scenario because the government is always confused whether the restaurant industry is selling goods in terms of the food items they are providing, or they are actually providing the services for which they are charging a markup over and above the food cost. So because of this confusion, restaurant industry is one very simple example to be taken, because of which the customer is being charged up both VAT also and service tax also, and because of which the ultimate burden is actually given to the final consumer in terms of a double taxation. With GST coming in frame, we say that it is going to be a good and a simple tax, because now we are actually coming to an era where we are trying to merge the goods and the services into one frame, which simply means now that these disputes of identifying a particular transaction to be as goods or as services is going to come to an end, that because even if it is a good or even if it is a service, in both the situations in the post GST regime, only GST shall be levied on the same. So the disputes whether it is goods and so charge VAT, or whether it is service and so charge services, and because we are not able to find out anything, let's charge both, comes to a rest. And through this we are expecting that the final consumer should get some benefits in terms of relief of this double taxation that was happening in a lot of areas like this. Furthermore, if I further give you an example, when I again go to the time when the GST was being first introduced into Lok Sabha, our Prime Minister introduced it in a way which was really very, alarming and surprising to hear, that in our country where we say that litigation is actually such a time-consuming task, the Supreme Court of the country, considered to be the apex court, are having cases to decide whether coconut is a fruit or a vegetable, and accordingly which type of tax and which rate of tax should be charged upon it. So it is really, alarming to see that the apex court of the country is having cases like this to be solved. Actually, and such are a lot of litigations on classification of a particular good or a service, or classification of a particular commodity into which type of commodity it is, has been huge litigation so far. So with GST coming in frame, we are actually expecting such litigations to be reduced, because we now have at least this parity that whether it is good or whether it is services, in both the situations we shall have only one type of taxes which is going to be levied on the same. Second in frame in this regard is another very important change that GST is targeting upon. I'm sure you all must have heard the slogan with GST, with which the GST was being introduced, by which they say one nation, one tax, which simply means that with GST coming in frame, the entire country is going to have a uniform tax structure, which simply again means, I'll again take a simple example to understand. I'm being a Delhi person, I have always seen this, that people in Delhi like to prefer they prefer buying a car from the state of Haryana. They go to Gurgaon and they want to buy a car from there instead of Delhi. This has been for the simple reason that the state of Haryana gives some tax concessions which is otherwise on a higher side in the state of Delhi. This happens because in the pre-GST regime, India being a federal country, every state had the autonomy to charge their own rate of taxes of VAT and CST. So which actually meant that a particular commodity, say for example the car that we have been discussing, was having a different rate of taxation if we buy it from the state of Delhi, and a different rate of taxation if we buy it from the state of Haryana. So that means every state had a different tax rate and a different tax structure to follow. But in the post-GST regime, this particular thing will come to an end, because now in the post-GST regime, whether you buy a particular commodity from Delhi or Haryana or any other part of the country, it will be tax neutral. That means that a same rate of tax will be charged for a particular commodity you buy it from anywhere in the country. So this we technically also call it as the rate buying concept, which will actually come to an end in the post GST scenario. Now when this happens, we also have to appreciate that what has really happened. What has really happened is that with GST coming in frame, the pre-GST scenario, I had talked about manufacturing and excise duty and the trading aspects of VAT and CST and the service tax on the services. But it has not just been like this. I'm sure when we as company secretary students understand that if someone wants to come to India and they want to start up a new business here, so you can very well imagine what all sort of registrations and what all sort of different things they are supposed to do. First, they are supposed to take a PAN number, then they are supposed to go for a bank account, and they are supposed to go for a company incorporation. Once you have the company being incorporated, then you go for registrations like the VAT registration or the excise registration or the service tax registration according to the business structure. Then we further need to go for like a lot of licensing structures that we are supposed to take, pollution controls or shop at establishment, or some this PF registrations or employee wages act we have to get registered. So there are n number of acts where you are supposed to get yourself registered, and then you're supposed to do the compliances, not just registration. Once you start the business, then you're supposed to do the different compliances. And now I'll tell you what used to happen was that the VAT return date in the state of Delhi was say 20th, and in the state of Maharashtra was say 15th of the next month. So every state had not just had their own rate of taxes, but they also had a different format in which the returns were supposed to be filed, and they were having different due dates in which the compliances were supposed to be done, and they were having different state VAT laws altogether which were governing their regulations. So which simply means that if an organization was say an organization having an office or having a manufacturing unit or a warehouse in say suppose 10 different states, that would really mean that you have to be mastering 10 different laws altogether and doing the compliances, doing their assessments, doing their registrations, doing their all regulatory aspects which were completely different from each state. So this had really been a very big pain area for the businesses to follow, because they were actually focusing more upon the compliances part rather than actually focusing more on their business development part. So with GST coming in frame, we also very beautifully say that Gaye Satra tax, because is one of the synonyms that we use for the GST, that is Gaye Satra tax, because broadly if we try and summarize, there are close to 17 taxes which are getting subsumed into the GST regime, and these 17 taxes, if you just go through the list, is the excise duty, the services tax, then the CVD, the SAD which we are having at the time of import, then the purchase tax, the luxury tax, the CST, the VAT, the Krishi Kalyan cess, Swachh Bharat cess, the entertainment tax, the advertisement taxes on the lotteries. Then we have again these if you just summarize, these come to around 17 different taxes which are getting subsumed into just one particular tax, which we call it as the GST. And along with these 17 different taxes, we also understand that we are moving towards a complete automation mechanism in GST. So we understand that even if we are a business unit located with its head office in Gurgaon and having offices in 10 different states, in the post GST regime we will be governed by just one one particular act, which will be the GST Act, and that act is going to give us complete automation of running the business through, you know, all internet facilities. And so we are having one uniform registration that we have to take, one uniform law that we have to follow, one uniform due dates that we have to follow for the compliances, one uniform format for the compliances that we have to follow. So this way we are definitely trying to achieve an ease of doing business in India through this GST coming in frame, which has been one of the major targets of the Indian government, to introduce GST, to you know, increase India's ranking in the ease of doing business index, which is being actually given by the World Bank for the international scenarios of the country. Next in line is, once we say that we have this uniform tax structure in the country, this has another very serious implication. That is that, you know, in the present structure, I was just explaining that there was a different tax rate in different states. So whenever there was an involvement of a movement of goods, say from state of Delhi to the state of Gurgaon or to the state of Rajasthan, then there used to be a very messy problem. And the problem used to be that on the movement of these goods, interstate movement of the goods, there were state borders, and on these state borders are some checkposts, and on these checkposts we all, I'm sure, are aware that it is not just the checking which happens, but there are a lot of other things which happen, which are not just leading to corruption but also leading to a lot of time wastages also for, you know, the goods to travel. If I give you some data, they say that in developed countries like the United States, the average traveling of a truck is close to 800 kilometers a day, and in countries like UK, this is actually close to somewhere around 400 kilometers a day, and in our country it is as low as around 240 to 250 kilometers a day. So an average truck in our country is just able to travel, say, approximately 250 kilometers a day. With GST coming in frame and these state borders losing their relevance of having a check post, because all the states are going to now have a state tax parity, that is the same rate of tax, these relevance of these check posts is going to come to an end. And when that happens, we are definitely expecting that the average time of a truck being traveling into our country shall also increase manifold, and the truck can now have more numbers of to and fro trips in a day than they were able to have before. And if that happens, logistics industry is one industry. Whenever this industry gets benefited, the economy as a whole gets benefited, because this industry is actually connected with each and every industry. So whenever the transportation cost gets reduced, every particular commodity, for the consumables, for the common man, for the manufacturing sector, for the trading sector, their cost gets reduced, the benefit of which the government has made sure should be passed on to the general consumer. So with GST coming in frame, this is another major benefit that we are looking forward to. Now, further, if we understand the next important benefit of GST, that is the end of the tax cascading effect. To understand tax cascading effect, let's just take a very small example. Presently, say if I am a manufacturer and a trader, so if I manufacture my goods and sell them, what I am supposed to do right now is, say if it is if the cost of my goods including my margin is, say, rupees 100, and so I am paying an excise duty of, say, rupees 10 on it. So what I'm supposed to do is I keep this 100, I add on this rupees 10 as an excise duty. Now the cost becomes 110, and now when I'm supposed to actually sell this particular good, I'm supposed to charge VAT on the same and sell. And when I'm going to charge VAT, I'm actually charging VAT on this value of 100 plus 10, that is 110, and 110, say 14% of a VAT or a 12.5% of a VAT is on this 110 value and not 100, which simply means that in the present regime we were having a tax cascading sort of a concept, where we were paying tax on tax. So this VAT is actually being paid on an element which is inclusive of excise duty. But in the post GST regime, such tax cascading effects will come to an end. That is, in the post GST regime, it is just going to be the transaction value of this rupees 100 on which I am going to pay my GST, irrespective of any other tax element being added to it. Of course, there are certain taxes which are not being covered into the ambit of GST, which will of course be added into this transaction value, but we have plans, the government has plans sooner or later to reduce these taxes to the minimum extent possible. So we can say that we are actually going to an era where we are trying to reduce the tax cascading to the minimum of its effect. And this VAT on the excise duty element, if you understand through this example, it may sound very simple and very minute, but if you go into the business practices and you understand, even 0.5% can be huge of an amount into millions and trillions. So that actually leads to a huge amount of cost savings to a manufacturer and a trader when it comes to this tax cascading getting mitigated with GST. So now, as we've understood, say around close to 17 taxes which are getting subsumed into GST, there are also few taxes which are not getting subsumed into GST. One of them we've already discussed is the basic custom duty. So once we are importing, basic custom duty continues to be levied the way it is, that is not getting subsumed into GST. Next in line is similarly the stamp duties which we've been paying for all our real estate purposes is also outside the ambit of GST. So it continues to be the way it is, and electricity duties that we have been paying so far is also something which is right now not into the ambit of GST. So we continue to pay such taxes in the GST regime also. And then of course you all, I'm sure, are aware that petroleum and alcohol is also apart from alcohol for human consumption is something also which is not being covered into the GST frame. So that is something which is also going to be continuing the way it is with the charge with the present taxes on these things. So these things will of course gradually will get subsumed into GST, but this is how the broader structure is. So all the present taxes, the central levies like the central excise and the service tax will actually get converted into the central GST, and taxes like CVD, SAD, CST will actually get replaced through IGST, and taxes like VAT, purchase, luxury, octroi, and all these sort of state levies are going to get migrated or get replaced with SGST, as we now understand is as the State GST Act. Right. Now, if we go step by step and we understand things further, we have to really now understand that the entire concept of GST is actually based on a complete automation mechanism. By automation mechanism, we simply mean that the government is actually going towards a portal which is by now named as www.gst.gov.in. This portal was again live from 3rd of November 2016, and since then the government every day is trying to upgrade it. From December onwards, December 2016 onwards, we had the migration of the existing taxpayers which was being first started on this particular portal, and now the portal is actually allowing the new registrations and is all set for the return purposes also gradually. So this complete automation mechanism that we are getting into is actually leading towards a lot of procedural changes into the GST frame also. So what I am trying to do is I am trying to summarize the entire concept into some bullet pointers or attention pointers. Step by step we will actually cover the laws relating to this particular frame. Right. So now if we understand, first of all, let's just understand things on the registration part of the GST before we move ahead. Now as we understand, the registrations under GST is actually required to be taken by every individual, every taxable person who is having an aggregate turnover of more than 20 lakh of rupees. Now this aggregate turnover is actually a turnover which is going to be decided according to your PAN number. turnover, one thing. Second thing is that this particular aggregate turnover will be inclusive of all your taxable turnover, all your export turnover and all your exempted turnover also. So in total, if you are actually providing some goods or services which are of a turnover of more than 20 lakhs, you are supposed to take a registration under the GST regime. Further now, there is a small basic understanding that we have to take, that is that we had just discussed few minutes ago that GST is actually a destination based consumption tax, but when it comes to registration, GST is still an origin based tax. We can say GST is still an origin based registration system concept. That means that you have to take a registration in each state where you are making a taxable supply from. So this is not really a new concept for the goods industry. That means for the manufacturer and trader of goods, this is what has been the present regime also. They have been taking a particular registration of VAT and excise in each of the states where they are having their manufacturing units or where they are providing their goods from. But for the services sector, we have been enjoying a centralized registration. So for example, if I am a service provider, say I'm a company secretary in practice and I am registered in the state of Delhi, Karnataka, Bangalore and Mumbai. So for all these 4-5 registrations that I'm having in different states, offices that I'm having in different state, I was just taking one particular registration as a centralized service tax registration, and I was being able to provide my services from all these 5 locations. But in the post GST regime, this is going to be a big change for the services sector, that we have to actually go towards a decentralized registration process where the law requires us to take a registration in each state we are making a taxable supply from. So like the goods industry, the services sector will also now have to take a decentralized registration. Say in this example, if I am a company secretary in practice and I am having my offices in the state of Delhi also, Gurgaon also and Karnataka, Chennai, Mumbai, I am supposed to take a separate registration for Delhi, for Gurgaon, Karnataka, Chennai and Mumbai. And accordingly, things will change in terms of my compliances also. So now this has been the basic for the registration. Further and all, in registration we have certain broader concepts which has been given in the section 24 and 25, where they say that this, before we go further, this 20 lakh of a limit is actually 10 lakhs in the northeastern states, right? And then there are certain categories which have been defined by the law where this 20 lakh of a threshold limit is also not been given. So what we broadly understand is, say for example, if I am an interstate supplier, right? Say for example, I am a manufacturer and my customers are a manufacturer located in the state of Delhi and my customers are located in the state of Rajasthan. So if this is the situation, even if my aggregate turnover is just ₹5 lakhs, I am supposed to mandatorily take a GST registration, because there are certain broad 8 to 12 categories which the government has defined where you have to take a compulsory registration irrespective of the threshold limit, which simply means, say for example, if I am having some interstate transactions, in that situation, even if I am making a ₹1 of an interstate sale, I am supposed to take a registration under GST irrespective of my threshold. Further, if I am an input service distributor registration, I am supposed to take a registration irrespective of the threshold. If I am an e-commerce operator, or even if I am a vendor to any e-commerce operator, I am supposed to take a registration mandatorily. Further, if I am someone who is having a liability to pay the taxes on a reverse charge basis of goods or of services, then also I am supposed to take a compulsory registration under GST irrespective of the threshold limits. So these are the broader categories where you are supposed to take a registration irrespective of the threshold limit which is being available of this 20 lakhs or 10 lakhs respectively in the country. So accordingly, registration has been one very big area where professionals are actually playing a very good role because of assistance in the industries, because registration in itself is having such tremendous implications in the GST regime, because each registration in the GST regime would actually mean a separate entity. So this is again a very major change concept of GST. So what happens right now is, say if I'm having my factory in Gurgaon and I'm having a warehouse in Rajasthan, presently these were not considered to be as two altogether independent entities, and through some forms and through some exemptions and through some notifications, relaxations that were being given, any transaction between this manufacturing unit in Gurgaon and this warehouse in Rajasthan was actually tax neutral, not having any tax implications on the same. But in the post GST scenario, each and every registration is going to be a separate registration with a separate legal existence altogether in the GST regime. So that means registration for me in the state of Delhi and in the same person, like if I again go to that example that if I'm a practicing company secretary and if I'm having an office in Delhi and Mumbai, so my Delhi office is going to be a complete independent entity in the eyes of the GST law, and my Mumbai office is going to be a completely different registered entity for the eyes of GST purposes. And any transaction between my Delhi registration of GST and Mumbai registration of GST is going to be considered similarly like it is being considered as two independent entities. And in such a situation, registrations where you are supposed to take, where you are not supposed to take, becomes a very, very important criteria of professional expertise which one should actually get into. So this was the basics of the registrations to talk about. If we now go further from registration to the next part of the structure, and that is to understand how the rate structure of the economy works. I had mentioned initially that GST is actually coming through a 4-tier, 5-tier rate structure, which was being first given by this GST Council on 3rd of November. And later on 1st of July, they actually finalized which all rate structure which will fall into. And in this rate structure, they had broadly given us that certain commodities will be taxed at the rate of 0%. So they will be having majorly no tax implications. They will be outside the ambit of GST. Then there will be a very essential rate of taxation of 5%, which is actually for the commonly used essential products and services. Then we have broadly two standard rates, which we call it as the standard rate 1 of 12% and a standard rate 2 of 18% GST rate. And then is finally a rate which is at the rate of 28%, which they call it as the luxury goods taxation rates. And on top of it, there is also a rate which talks about a 28% plus some cess element, which is on ultra luxury goods and sin goods like aerated drinks, pan masala, or some luxury high-end cars, etc. So this has been broadly the 4-5 tiers rate structure that the government has introduced GST with. In such a situation, they say that it's actually anything which is left out of the ambit of GST, nothing at all. And if we talk about further now in the next few minutes is the concept of supply that I had told you, that is the new manufacturing and is the new sale and is the new providing of services, is actually nothing but supply concept in the GST regime. So very popularly these days I've been hearing they say on a very lighter note, I'll say a wife was asking a husband that how much do you love me? So the husband said, I love you close to 72%, and the wife was a little confused, and the wife asked why 72%. So the husband replied, because now we have GST of 28% on non-luxury items. So in that regard, they say that GST is actually something which is affecting each and every part of the country, even in husband-wife relationship. So if we see it like this, then of course GST is actually impacting the country altogether. But now if we move ahead and understand the concept of supply, supply actually is the most important concept of the entire GST structure. We actually have introduced GST with this concept of supply broadly defined into 4 categories. First of all is supply with consideration. Supply with consideration basically includes any sort of a business transaction, whether it is sale, barter, exchange, lease, rental, disposal, anything. Any transaction of this nature nature with consideration during the course of furtherance of business is actually coming into the ambit of GST. And further, they have introduced this concept of supply without consideration also. So there is a specific schedule 2 in the GST Act which talks about the entire transaction which shall be covered under the ambit of GST, even if they are being provided without consideration. So in in times I'll give you some examples of it also. Then further, there are certain transactions who've been given as the negative list, that there will be no GST on the same, and there are certain transactions which will be considered as deemed goods or as deemed services. So they have categorically defined certain transactions that will be treated as goods and certain transactions that will be categorically treated as services. For example, I'll just pick and choose one of the most litigated and the most confused thing that we were having till date in the present regime is the works contract. So the works contract was basically a contract where in the present regime we were having a lot of dilemmas as to whether we should split the contracts or whether we should charge a composite rate or whether we should go for an abated value, and basically we were having a lot of problems in the works contract concept where we are actually providing goods and services together for an altogether purposes, mostly in the areas of construction and real estate industries. So in the GST regime, this works contract related to an immovable property, construction, commissioning, renovation, anything related to an immovable property has been categorically defined as the supply of services. So these kind of things will definitely lead to a reduction of a litigation of classifications which we had initially discussed, which were being prevailed in the country because of whether we are dealing in goods or whether we are dealing in services. Such litigation will definitely come to an end, because now we've been categorically defined as this will be considered as goods and this will be considered as services, and accordingly the rates and rules which are varying in the GST law shall apply on the same. So in the GST law, actually the tax rate and the tax nomenclature remains the same for goods and services. It is just the concept of place of supply and time of supply which changes if it is a good or if it is a service, which we'll understand how things are going to change. Now, next important thing that I would like to talk about is the place of supply concept in the GST regime, which to my mind is another very crucial thing to understand, because this place of supply is going to be one major element of deciding whether a particular transaction is an intrastate transaction on which CGST plus SGST should be paid, or whether a particular transaction should be taken as an interstate transaction on which IGST should be paid. So before we identify a particular transaction and we decide a particular tax, it is important to understand what is the place of supply for a particular transaction, because only then we will be able to identify such nature of a transaction. And now, before we understand these provisions, another important aspect which has to be kept in mind is why is it really important to identify a particular transaction to be intrastate or interstate, because the law categorically says that if, for example, you treat a particular transaction to be an intrastate transaction on which CGST and SGST should be charged, but you by mistake treat it like an interstate transaction on which IGST is being charged, then what is supposed to be done is that you have to pay the correct CGST and SGST that should have been paid again and apply for the wrongly paid IGST as a refund. So you can just imagine if that happens, and if that happens quite often, that you do a mistake in identifying a particular transaction as intrastate and as an interstate, you end up paying the taxes twice and going for a refund. So they say refund is going to be very easy, but how easy it is to get something out of the government is something which is yet to be seen. But definitely it is going to lead to a good amount of working capital impact that we are going to have if such wrong taxation is being charged on the invoices. So that becomes very important, and therefore becomes important the concept of place of supply. So now, for identifying any particular transaction to be intrastate transaction, we have to identify the location of two things. One is the location of the supplier, and second is the place of supply. So if the location of the supplier and the place of supply is in the same particular state, then a transaction shall be considered to be as an intrastate transaction on which CGST and SGST should be charged. And similarly, if the place of supply and the location of the supplier are in two different states, then the GST shall be levied in the nomenclature of IGST, and this shall be considered as an interstate transactions. So now we have understood the location of supplier actually comes from the registration. Wherever is the location, or wherever is the supplier registered, that becomes the location of the supplier. So that state becomes the location of the supplier. The next element important is identification of the place of supply. Now, place of supply is being defined under the GST Act in the IGST Act. And in IGST Act, they have categorically divided the place of supply for domestic and for international transactions, for goods and for services separately. So we can go in detail of those sections if you want to. I broadly will talk about the major implications of the place of supply concept for goods and for services. When we talk about goods, the place of supply is having first of all a general rule, and the general rule says that if there is any movement of goods which is involved, then the place of supply shall always be the place where the goods are getting terminated for for being handed over to the recipient. So wherever the movement of the goods is getting terminated for being handed over to the final customer or the consumer of the goods, that becomes the place of supply. For example, say again, if I am having a factory in the state of Gurgaon, Haryana, and I am having one of the customers in the state of Rajasthan. So the goods are traveling from this factory of mine in Gurgaon to the state of Rajasthan. So what happens is the location of the supplier becomes where I am registered, that is in the state of Gurgaon, that is where my factory is located, and the goods are actually getting terminated after the movement for the handing over to the final customer in the state of Rajasthan. So here in this situation, the location of the the location of the supplier and the place of supply are in two different states, and hence this transaction will be considered as an interstate transaction on which IGST shall be levied, and this IGST shall be going to the state of Rajasthan, as we had initially discussed that this is actually a destination based consumption tax system where the states where the consumer is located is going to get the benefit of the GST paid on the same. Right. So in such a situation, this is one of the general rules of place of supply for goods. Now further for goods, I'll also like to discuss just two more scenarios, and that is a bill to ship to concept, which is again a very popular common concept in the goods industry, where what happens is, suppose I am supposed to buy a particular product for myself in the or say we take it even simpler. Say I am again a manufacturer and I am located as my factory in the state of Gurgaon, Haryana, and I am supposed to provide certain goods to again one of my customers located in Rajasthan. But this customer of mine who's located in Rajasthan says that instead of getting the goods delivered to me, why don't you deliver the goods directly to one of my clients whom I am supposed to provide this particular goods in the state of Karnataka. So what is happening right now is this particular customer of mine, which is in the state of Rajasthan, is requesting me to deliver the goods on his behalf to the state of Karnataka. So this concept we actually call it as the bill to ship to concept, where I am asked to bill it to the customer in Rajasthan and ship or deliver the goods to the location of his customer, which is in Karnataka. So in such bill to ship to concept, what we are trying to say is the location of the bill to person on whose behalf the goods are actually getting traveled to the state of Karnataka shall be considered to be as the place of supply for my transaction, and in such a situation I shall be charging IGST, which will go to the state of Rajasthan, right, even if my goods are actually getting traveled to the state of Karnataka. So similar situation would have been, say, if I am actually located in the state of Haryana and one of my customers is also located in the state of Haryana and they are asking me to deliver certain goods in the state of Delhi directly. In such a situation, even though my goods are actually getting delivered to the state of Delhi, it shall not be considered as an interstate transaction but an intrastate transaction, as the place of supply in such a bill to ship to concept shall be the location of this third person on whose behalf the goods have been travelling, which is in the state of Haryana itself, and so it will be considered as an intrastate transaction on which CGST and SGST shall be levied for the state of Haryana. Right. So such is the concept of place of supply in for goods. Next in line, one more important aspect of the goods place of supply which I shall like to take up is the the goods which are actually related towards an immovable property. So anything that you are actually providing for the immovable property is actually the location of the immovable property where the place of supply becomes. So even if you are actually providing certain goods, right, say you are a lift vendor, an elevator vendor, and that elevator is actually requiring is actually something which is getting involved with a particular immovable property. So even if the elevator is being provided but it is getting installed and it is getting fixed to an immovable property, then in that situation the location of the immovable property becomes the place of supply, irrespective of the fact that wherever you are actually registered or your customer is actually registered. So these were the broad parameters of place of supply for goods. When we talk about place of supply of services, it is equally important. Now the general rule for place of supply of services, they say, is going to be the location of the service recipient in case the recipient is a registered person. Now in such a situation, what happens is, say for example, for services sector, we'll just take a very easily understandable example for all of us, that is, say a practicing company secretary who is providing consultancy services. So if I am registered in the state of, if I am having my office in Gurgaon, so I am registered in Haryana and one of my clients is actually located in the state of Gurgaon only, and so if I am providing any consultancy services to this client or this company who is having their registered office in the state of Gurgaon only, then I am going to charge CGST and SGST for my consultancy services. If for example the client is having their registered office in the state of Rajasthan, then I am going to charge them an IGST for my consultancy to them. So for services, it is very simple. It is going to be the location of the service recipient in case the recipient is a registered person. In case the recipient is an unregistered person under the GST law, say for example, you are giving a consultancy to an individual person who is not having a turnover of more than 20 lakh of rupees, and so he is not supposed to take any registration under the GST law. In such a situation, the location of the service provider only becomes the place of supply. So in our example, the location of the consultant, the practicing company secretary, which is in the state of Gurgaon only, becomes the place of supply, and in that situation CGST and SGST shall be charged on such an invoice to an unregistered person. Right. So this is broadly the concept of place of supply for services. Again, in place of supply of services, we have this specific rules which talk about that how in different situations the place of supply is going to change. Again, if we talk about an immovable property, and I'll take an example, say suppose I am an architect and I am registered in this, I am having my office again in Gurgaon, right, and one of the companies has hired me for providing some architecture services to them, and say for example this company is also having one of their offices in the state of Gurgaon only, and they hire me for providing some interior decoration or some interior structuring of their office in Gurgaon. So in such a situation, I will be charging CGST and SGST services for the architectural services they have hired. But what will happen, say suppose this company who has hired me, who is having their office in Gurgaon only, for one of their offices in Mumbai, and they want me to do some interior decoration services for their Mumbai office. So now we understand that I had just mentioned that for services, the first thing that we have to check for the place of supply is that if the recipient is a registered person, then wherever is the registered location, that will be considered to be as the place of supply. So if in this example we see that this company is registered in the state of Gurgaon only, they are registered assessee in Gurgaon, so I can treat it like a CGST and SGST intrastate transaction, but it is not like that, because in case of an immovable property which they are having in the state of Mumbai and they have hired me for some interior decoration services for their Mumbai office, the place of supply irrespective of their registration in Gurgaon shall become Mumbai, and in that situation I will be charging an IGST invoice on the same, because I am registered in the state of Gurgaon and the place of supply becomes the location of the immovable property which is in the state of Mumbai. So such are the things where you have to be very, very cautious. I have taken some very basic examples, but there are a lot of rules according to which the place of supply for goods and for services changes accordingly, and hence you have to be very, very sure before raising a particular invoice that which is the place of supply, because of course, we are just talking about the basics right now, but if we go into the details of the invoicing rules, and if you have started receiving, because now we are into the GST era and I am sure you are going out for restaurants and for food, for shopping and for all sort of consultancy services and etc., and you have started receiving some GST invoices already, and if you see on those invoices, we are supposed to mention the place of supply for all interstate transactions as per the invoicing rules. So it becomes very, very important to identify in a particular transaction what is the place of supply, because right now of course the government is lenient, the government is relaxing, the government is giving motivation for everybody to settle out with this new act, but in the times to come when things will settle, place of supply will actually become one of the major areas for assessments and litigations, because this is where the states are going to win and lose their revenues, because this has been another very major reason for GST is being lingered upon in our country since so many years, because the states like Tamil Nadu, who were manufacturing rich states, were now going to lose in the post GST regime because it's a destination based consumption tax. Initially it was an origin based taxation, so they were actually getting the tax benefits if more and more industries were coming to their states, but now the states like Delhi are going to be more beneficial, which are having a good population base and less of an industrial base, because GST is going to be given to the state where the consumer is located and not where the supplier is located. So such is the concept of GST and such is the concept of place of supply, which becomes really important for us to be understood. Now if we further go into the broader aspects, I would like to first of all cover certain important features with which I call it as the new concepts that have been introduced into the GST regime. Now these new concepts which we are talking about is, first of all, is the concept or similar to the 26AS concept that is being introduced into the GST regime. I am sure you all know what is the 26AS concept. You have been seeing the TDS getting reflected into your 26AS. So what happens is, right now, say for example, if I am a salaried person and my salary is getting deducted and my TDS is getting deducted on this particular salary, my employer is supposed to deposit this TDS, and whatever TDS he is depositing gets reflected into my 26AS. So the similar direct tax concept is being introduced into the GST indirect taxation system also, where we simply try to say that in the post GST regime, say for claiming a particular input tax credit of the goods of the GST paid on the procurement of any goods or services shall be dependent upon the compliance of my vendor. So my vendor is supposed to actually pay the taxes, deposit the same with the government and file the return. Once he will do so, like the 26AS, it will also reflect into my input tax credit ledger onto the GST portal, and accordingly I shall be able to claim my credits, because of which now in the entire GST regime we are dependent upon the compliances of our vendors for claiming input tax credit, which is actually a very, very big change of administration and of doing businesses in India that the businesses have to follow. Next important pointers that if I give you in a summarized manner is the taxability of the GST on stock transfers. So if we quickly understand what happens in the present regime is that if I'm having, say, my factory located in Gurgaon and one of my warehouses located in Rajasthan, and if I presently have some customer in Rajasthan and say suppose my stock is getting finished in my warehouse in Rajasthan, what I used to do was I used to transfer certain stock from my Gurgaon factory to my Rajasthan warehouse, and this used to be a tax-free movement of goods, because I just used to say that I'm just transferring the goods from one of my premises in the state of Gurgaon to another of my premises only in the state of Rajasthan. So actually I'm not selling any goods, I'm just making a transfer of stock from one place to another place, and for that I used to use a form F, and I was not paying any particular CST on the same, which I was otherwise required to be paying for an interstate transaction. But in the post GST regime, as I mentioned, that each particular registration will be considered to be as a separate entity. So even if we are making a supply now in this particular situation of a stock transfer from my factory to my godown, it will be considered to be as a chargeable GST transaction on which IGST shall be levied, considering the two into different particular states. And this is also one of the examples for supply without consideration. So even if I'm not charging anything for the same, I'm actually just making a transfer, it will be considered to be as a supply without consideration but taxable in the eyes of law. So such stock transfer is now going to be considered as a taxable event. Third major important point with respect to the GST law is that capital goods, the entire input tax credit can now be claimed in the year of purchase itself. You no more required to bifurcate it into 2 years of 50% input tax credit. Another major thing that is going to affect with GST coming in frame is the entire complete accounting procedure that we are supposed to follow. As I clearly mentioned, we have to now follow an accounting which is state registration specific. Further, we have to bifurcate it into interstate or an intrastate transaction. Then we have to bifurcate it into as a CGST, SGST, IGST transaction, and then accordingly we need to bifurcate it into in terms of its value, because the returns that we are supposed to file under the GST regime requires the bifurcation of entire transaction in this manner only. If I broadly talk about lastly the returns under the GST which we are supposed to file is broadly, I am sure you must have heard, 37 returns for each registration that we are supposed to taking. So that simply means that we have to first file a return of supply outwards, which is a sale transactions of a particular month, has to be uploaded by the 10th of the following month. So all my supply outwards have to be uploaded by 10th of the next month. Accordingly, what will happen is that this will get auto populated to one of my purchasers. So if my sale, it is going to be your purchase. So as soon as I'm going to upload all my sales details, it will auto populate and reflect it into my purchasers GST and portal, and accordingly he will have to tick, untick, accept, reject the sale transactions that I'm showing is on behalf of him as a purchaser. That has to be done by 15th of the next month, and then after this approval rejection by the seller and the purchaser with each other, I am supposed to file my final return, that is my GSTR 3. So GSTR 1 by the 10th of the next month, considering all my supply outward details. Then the auto populated purchaser return, that has to be done by GSTR 2 by the 15th of the next month, and then after GSTR 1 and 2 I am supposed to do a reconciliation of this GSTR 1 and 2 through the form GSTR 3, which becomes my final return for the month, and that has to be uploaded by 20th of the next month. So this is how I am supposed to file 3 returns every month and 1 return annually for each registration, and this annual return has to be filed by 31st December of the next following financial year, which also requires certain assessees of having a turnover of more than 2 crore of rupees to get it certified by a chartered accountant or a cost accountant, and accordingly we just multiply. So 3 into 12, 36 plus 1 annual. So this is how we say 37 returns per year for each registration. So if I'm having offices in say like 5 states or 10 states, I just need to multiply these 37 into 10, and this is how the number of returns I'm supposed to file. So this is broadly the returns that we have to cover in the GST regime. I would like to conclude this particular session with the last concept of GST, which is a very interesting concept that has been introduced into the GST scenario, which is the compliance rating concept of GST. So now we all know that we've been used to using Book My Shows and Zomatos before actually going for a dining or for a particular movie. We go for these apps and we want to see the review, we want to see the rating, we want to see the review of a particular restaurant. Similarly, if I give you a more prominent example, if we go to a bank and we ask for a loan, the first thing the banker asks us is the CIBIL score, and only if the CIBIL score is up to the banking parameters, they allow us for a particular loan, because they check through the CIBIL score the credibility of a particular person, the track record of a particular person in the whether it is up to the mark and whether the same can be given a particular amount of loan or not. So such similar CIBIL score concept has been introduced into the GST regime also, which makes the compliances under GST very crucial and important, and we as professionals can play a very important role in this scenario once we say that compliances have such stringent policies in the GST regime that it is not just about fines and penalties if you are not doing your compliances well, it is also about your compliance rating score, which is like a review rating which has been given by the GST Council or by the GST portal to each taxable person on the GST portal on the basis of their compliance track record. So if you are filing your returns on time, if you are paying your taxes on time, then your compliance rating score on the public portal or the GST portal shall be say 5 on 5 stars. And if it is not so, then that simply means that you are not filing your returns and you are not paying your taxes on time. In such a situation, in the GST regime, every person would now like to actually go and see your compliance rating before buying any goods or services from you, because only if you are doing your compliances well on time, I am going to get my taxes in terms of my input tax credit. So that makes returns very important, and compliance is very important to be followed in the GST regime. So with this, I would like to put rest to this session today. I hope some basic understanding of the GST law should have been implemented to all of you, and I hope the institute continues to have more such of a sessions so that this knowledge series can be continued and the students can get the maximum of its benefit.
We thank Ms. Meenal for giving us such deep insights about GST. We would like to ask a few queries from her which we received from the students in general. Sure. So ma'am, what would be your advice that how should a CS student gain knowledge about GST? What all can they do about it?
Okay. So I feel this is a really very important question that should be addressed for a student webinar, because most of the time we keep talking about that this is the new change, this is the new law, but what we fail to understand as a student sometimes is that how do we really impart ourselves with this new particular law, and how does it really benefits us. So what I feel is that the institute is doing a lot of things, so the students should actually attend more such of these webinars. There are a lot of newsletters, journals, academic things that the institute is also publishing. This institute, the other institute bodies also, the government in itself is coming up, the government's website gst.gov.in and CBEC is the two major websites that I shall recommend every student who wants to specialize into the GST regime should be thoroughly viewing on a daily basis, because at this particular moment every day there's a new notification, clarification, update that is coming up. So the students should actually be encouraged to read, go through all these materials very well. And of course we have clarifications in terms of the YouTube also, we have faculty members also where you should approach, and you should just keep one thing in mind, that if you really want to expertise in this particular area, you should just get into it, and then of course there are I'm sure a lot of ways out where you can get your queries sorted. And in my personal capacity also, I've always been there for any sort of student queries, so I am still there readily available available for any student. If you want to share, you know, you can share my credentials, and I'll be more than happy to answer any of the students' queries in terms of their preparation also.
And ma'am, what do you think would be the scope of a company secretary vis-a-vis in the new GST law?
Okay, so now the Institute of Company Secretaries of India has been really working very hard and very robustly with you know, the government, the GST councils, the commissioner, the parliament, to get themselves placed into the GST fraternity very well. So, you know, a lot of times it's been considered that taxation is not really the forte of a company secretary, but this time the government has also, you know, given us this opportunity. The institute has also taken very robust steps towards it, and a GST practitioner concept has been introduced into the GST law itself, where it simply allows a company secretary also to be a GST practitioner, and a GST practitioner can get themselves enrolled into the GST site also. The registrations for a GST practitioner is already started from 25th of June, and a GST practitioner can be someone who can assist in any sort of return filing, compliances, consultancies to any assessee. And of course, not just this as a, you know, matter of frame, because this I discussed is actually categorically mentioned in the law for the company secretaries. But apart from that, this being a new law, it actually brings everybody at par. So even if a company secretary who's not yet had any past experience of any indirect taxes can now actually venture into this particular stream, where in itself the competition for company secretaries is much lesser than any other fields of expertise. So this is where I feel that company secretaries have great opportunities in terms of compliances, in terms of consultancies, in terms of business reforms, because GST, you know, is not coming like a tax reform. It is actually coming like a business reform. So there are business reports that has to be given, business restructuring decisions which has to be taken, and when we consider company secretaries as key managerial personnel, then all these business reform decisions is where I feel that if they have a GST knowledge, they can play a better role there also.
Yeah, because as we all know, indirect taxes have never been a core area of practice for a company secretary. Right. So how do you think how much is there a future for a company secretary?
I see a very bright future, honestly, because of the simple reason that first of all, very basically, when we talk about economies, we talk about demand and supply, and even if we go by that simple thing, we see that company secretaries are very, very less in this field of taxation. And I have categorically mentioned here that when it is a new law, we come at par, and once we are at par, anybody who takes a first mover advantage in this particular field will obviously get, you know, a monopoly, and we can mint money like anything also. This is what I feel. So just get into it, explore it, come out of that shell of, you know, comfort zone that it is not our expert area, because this is the time where it is actually can become an expertise area for anyone, because it is a law which is becoming and bringing everyone of us at par.
We thank Ms. Meenal for taking out such valuable time and giving us such deep insights about various aspects of GST. Friends, we hope you benefited from this session. We will resume the next session in 2 to 3 minutes. Please stay tuned, and thank you.
Thank you.